Well, there's a story, the one that I sent around was from the New York Post, but really it is everywhere right now. It's you name it. If you Google Canacook, it's coming up. Canacook Camp, which is one of the biggest Christian camps on the planet. Depending on the summer, Canacook and Pine Cove typically go back and forth with who's the biggest, depending on who's built new cabins and all this stuff. And they are this massive camp, and they had 80 some campers and staff get sick with the Rona once they had opened back up. Here's this massive camp that is one of the leaders in the industry. If you don't know the camping world, there's an accreditation body, kind of like SACS if you're a college in the Southeast, or ACSI if you're a Christian school, but it's this camp accreditation body. And this is one of the poster kids for this body. And they have 80 plus people get sick at camp. And the article is not from a Christian perspective. And it's kind of, what are these people doing? But just the broader thing in church world or in parachurch world right now is these parachurch ministries are struggling. And so camps are making the decision to open that probably shouldn't be opening. Right now, I'm supposed to be speaking at a camp in Lake Wales, Florida. It's one of my favorite places on the planet. My wife and I met there. I get to go back and speak there just about every summer.
I have a long history there too.
And they announced on Friday that they were done for the year because they had some campers get sick after waiting to start their season until June 26th. So they had 3 weeks of camp and then had to pull the plug on the rest of their summer. So yeah, I want to talk about, Canacook, obviously, because they're the big name. They're the brand name that everybody knows. But just in general, whereas churches seem to be doing all right in this season and people are continuing to give, these parachurch ministries that depend so much on customers, whether it be what was the World Changers, the SBC missions organization that was 50 some years old, had to close. Parachurch organizations are just struggling right now. And so they're making these financial decisions that are not the right decision. And I wonder what it's going to look like for the future of camp, for the future of Bible colleges, because there's going to be a whole lot of students going to their local community college instead of going to their local Bible college in the fall. So it's going to be an interesting next few years for parachurch ministry.
Yeah, man. I mean, Frank and I's alma mater for Bible college, my father-in-law is the academic dean. So the last few weeks of conversations with him are all about how are they going to reopen? And yeah, it's a tough one, man. I have to say, related to this, there's a couple things it makes me think of. Number one, it makes me think of what Andy Stanley did in terms of, I know that's so crazy sounding, but I respect the leadership to just be able to say, I'm just going to go ahead and make this hard decision. And, no matter what he did, people were going to be, either side going to be frustrated with him. I respect the leadership. I'm not sure that works for every church. And what I wonder is, I think with camps, it's like their business is an in-person business. It's an inherently in-person thing. You can't do digital camp. I mean, you can, but it's it's not the same thing. And I wonder how many small, predominantly older congregations are actually going to close during this because they don't know how to deal with the technology. I know that myself, I've been helping out an older guy in my neighborhood make his sermon videos. And if I wasn't doing that, I don't think they would be doing anything right now. So
yeah, I think it has more to do with the pastor than the congregation. Because
our median ages, I have folks in my church who and I'm sure you do too in Florida. Yeah. I mean, older folks who just struggle to figure out how to get on. I mean, at this point, I'm guys, it's been 3 months. You can figure out how to get on Zoom, but I just wonder how many churches that maybe didn't start off right away with online stuff because their pastor was older, maybe he was close to retirement or whatever, and they just kind of fizzled out. We have a church that rents our building that ended up closing. One of our 2 or 3, we had 3 renters, now we have 2, and they were very small, and they just were yeah, we're we're just not going to make it. So I wonder how much of that's going on that like we're not going to find out about for another 6 months or something.
I think in regards to like churches and meeting and whether they should or shouldn't, I think that goes back to like you have to lead wisely, but you also have to understand and know your people. I mean, I have a friend here in town and his congregation is primarily 55 and up. And the first week he tried to do a Zoom call.
We call those young people at my church.
Okay, yeah. So you know, like the first week he tried to do a Zoom call and it just next week you try to do Facebook Live. Eventually, he actually pays for a conference call service. And now his people actually come in and treat it like a conference call from the 70s. They dial a number and then they have to dial another number to get in. And then he sets his phone in front of him at the pulpit for the ones who are in the room. And he's just preaching they're sitting on the conference call, listen to him preaching. And for me, a lot of it is like, how can we reach them? And I think that's pretty creative. But back to your camp point, man, that is very touchy because even we had several churches in this community come back from camp with COVID. It's not just an isolated thing here. I know of several churches, and I think the churches who handled it best were transparent the whole way through with their communications. Like they told the parents up front, we can refund you your money, but if they go to camp, like we're going to do everything we can, but you have to assess the risk, you know, because I think churches, like if we're just going to go and guilt parents into making their kids go, that's different. I think churches got to lead in and be transparent and say, hey, listen, no guilt if you can't or don't want to go. And then as far as me as the staff, and this is something I would tell my student pastor if we took kids to camp, do not be posting any pictures of them hanging on each other. Yeah. Like, listen, we all know how camp is. You know what's going down there. Yeah, it's going to, like they're going to be hanging out at the pools, but that does not go on social media at all. And
you're not posting a single picture without masks on, without people noticeably apart. And me and Tim, we regularly share screenshots of our buddies. And I've got a buddy who's a youth pastor, and they were at camp last week, and he kept posting these pictures of, hey, here's 12 kids in a van. I'm like, oh gosh, why are you posting that?
Yeah, you're just asking for angry emails. Yeah. Dude. I even think like I'm even like wary now of posting. I was literally yesterday afternoon. Maybe Saturday afternoon. I don't remember. Everything's a fog now. But I was out and about. There's a city here called Ellicott City, and we decided to go eat at a restaurant that has a big covered outdoor area. And so I was out there, and then, which, you know, I wasn't wearing a mask while I was eating outdoors, which is pretty safe. And our numbers in Maryland are going down right now. So I'm starting to feel okay with that kind of stuff. And then we decided to go walk this old historic downtown. And I was sitting on a bench in this random old historic downtown, eating a little bowl of ice cream that I had bought. And a church member texts me and says, hey, I see you sitting outside. Why aren't you wearing a mask? I was like, dang, man. And they were like, you know, I know you're outside. I'm just kidding around. And they were just being funny. But it was like, I immediately was like panic mode. Like, oh, great. Now I'm being inconsistent. So it's just like, it's so hard, man. Danny, I was wondering from your perspective as, you know, thinking church planting wise, I'm in kind of a replant situation. So one of the things I'm wondering, you know, what advice would you share for guys who are like me at an established church that are basically in this situation where we really do have an opportunity to hit the reset button right now? Like we can make drastic changes right now. And basically, you know, it was COVID. We had to make changes. So like, how would you advise?
We had to change that logo.
Right.
That logo was awful. And because of COVID, we had to change it.
We had to change our service time. But even beyond that, like, now is the opportunity to make those drastic changes. I feel like, man, we're not going to do this in the service and we are going to do this. Or even beyond that, like, we're not going to be so Sunday centric. We're going to do other things during the week. Like, how would you coach a guy like in that situation?
Yeah, well, absolutely. One of the things that I had my own freak out moment. First of all, when this all started, I was actually in Destin, Florida, spring break. They started shutting down all the beaches. And I've shared with a number of people. I looked over at my wife and I said, man, two things. One is I'm so glad I'm not a lead pastor right now. And number two, I might need to find a different job. Like, is church planning dead? I mean, my whole job revolves around gathering people together and training people how to launch a church out of that. But I've seen actually that I think that the pandemic can be a blessing in two areas. First of all, is I do believe that there is a great pruning of the church that's happening right now. And I'm really careful as I share that. I know that's some of what you were speaking about with the camps and parachurch. But if there's an unhealthy church going into the pandemic, this may be the thing that just, is the straw that breaks the camel's back on it. And
it's accelerating.
Yeah. And I don't mean just small churches. This can be huge, large churches that have invested so much in facilities, so much in Sunday, and there was unhealth for their message, their method, whatever it is, and that this is going to be used to kind of, prune them, so to speak. So I mean that in a positive sense, because we know that from a biblical perspective that pruning is what precedes growth. And I think that we're going to see that in the church. The second thing that I think that we're seeing because of the pandemic is ingenuity. And that kind of goes to your question. This is an opportunity for church plants, established churches, replants to think creatively. Evangelism is still going to happen. Discipleship is still going to happen. Prayer is still going to happen. Bible study is still going to happen. It's just going to be done differently. So, I mean, I'll tell you the biggest thing that often holds leaders and pastors and church planters back is the fear of failure. You have the most wonderful excuse now to try anything you've ever wanted. And if it flops, that happened during COVID. So we tried this outreach idea. We tried this church planning model or this small group model, whatever it is. And you literally can blame it on COVID. And right along with what you said, I can't affirm enough. If you've been wanting to change something, change staff, change name, change meeting time, location, whatever it is, now's your opportunity. You can just change it. I say go wholesale on it. Change everything. Just go for what. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? You're going to get fired right now. I mean, if you're getting fired from a church in the middle of COVID, then you probably, you've got, it could be a lot worse. So anyways, I say this is your opportunity. Absolutely go for it. Make those changes now and try. It's an experimenting time. It might not work. So then you regroup and try something else.
I remember when Perry Noble was launching the Second Chance Church, and he was planting the church essentially on Facebook Live. And I remember talking to some buddies and be like, that's weird, right? Like, forget the past 3 years of his life. Like, just planting a church on Facebook Live is a weird thing to be doing, right? And now I'm thinking, that's brilliant. There's zero startup cost.
Right.
Your worship leader doesn't need to be in the same room as you. That's a brilliant way to start a church.
You don't even need a worship leader. You can use somebody else's worship. It doesn't seem. I mean,
Carrie Joe will do a set for you.
Exactly.
And as long as you promise not to monetize it, you can use it.
Right.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, I think so. Kind of what I'm hearing is, and I super affirm what you were saying about the pruning of the church. I mean, I live in South Carolina, and Christmas and Easter Christian, like the cultural Christian thing is just still thick here. But I feel like we're going through a time where God's like, hey, church discipline should have been happening at the church at large, and it hasn't been. So I'm just going to kind of come in, and it's going to hurt maybe a little bit more than it would have if we'd have been being obedient the whole time. So, but with that said, I feel like what I'm hearing you with programs is, hey, listen, if the people are pruning, now's the time for us to be looking at our own programs and saying what needs to be pruned here as well. Like, what are the things that we can quit doing? And I think some of the churches that I'm seeing they're not going to go to camp this year, and they're going to take that money and take that effort somewhere else. And they're going to realize maybe we should have pruned that.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a scary thought.
I think, and to go full circle back to Andrew's thing, is like, I think one thing I've noticed a lot of churches doing where they would spend like, $10, $15, $20,000 to go to a big box camp. And they're like, all right, we got to figure something out. And they may turn it into like a 3-day kind of like a VBS for teenagers type of thing, and they're trying to find these in interesting ways, and maybe not necessarily spending less money, like saving money from camp, but they're repurposing that money in a way that is more internal. And then if they come on the other side and like, that was good, then they might not go back to the big camps, and they might not go back to those places, which it's like, I said this to someone else. Like I don't want big camps to go away. One, because I like speaking for them. I like them making me travel and making me speak at their events. Like I hope CIY comes back. I hope Student Life comes back. I hope all these places come back. But at the same time, like I think with with this pandemic, it's going to cause a lot of, especially smaller churches where like money's harder to raise. They're going to really think about, do we need to get in a bus and go, to a different state when we can do something pretty decent in-house? And I think like in the same way that there's like a great pruning in the church, I think there's going to be somewhat a pruning in the parachurch, which, I think personally, it's like I have mixed feelings with some parachurch organizations, but I also have like a lot of strong affections for a lot of parachurch organizations. And I think like if this causes all parachurches to like really examine like how are we going to survive this to be a 2020 version of a parachurch organization, like that, it's probably not a bad thing, but there's probably going to be some entities that we're not going to see again because they either got bought up, they sold, or they couldn't survive it.
And that is even our situation. So Converge has a camp in Michigan, and it basically had to shut down, and we don't know if it will survive. It's a couple $1 million camp, and
wow.
It's based on that, and that's just part of the reality where what we've been telling everybody else, and it's a great pruning. Well, the jury's kind of still out on that, and those decisions actually are being made in the next couple of weeks because, they got the PPE, but after that runs out, it's kind of like, well, like we don't have $50,000 to feed the horses right now because there's no one coming. It's just ridiculous how much hay those horses eat.
Well, and it's like Frank, when you were talking about CIY or student life, those camps, or they're more conferences. My favorite class in seminary was Christian camping because it was like the easiest A ever. But it was great because it was like the practical ministry side of things for a third of the class. Then there was like the ministry marketing because marketing and camps is so important. And then the third part was just like the legal and financial side. And insurance costs have like doubled, tripled, and quadrupled for camps in the past 10 or 15 years. And so the camps that are saying, hey, University of Tennessee, we're going to rent out half your dorm rooms and your stadium or your arena, and we're going to bring in the big name music acts that kids don't even listen to anyway. But we're going to rent out this hotel resort that has the built-in water park. We're going to do our camp there. Those camps are going to be fine because they have no overhead. It's the denominationally owned camps that have property, that have horses, that have people that live there year round.
That just is there.
Yeah, those are the ones that 3 years from now, there's going to be a bunch of really cute cul-de-sacs where camp used to exist.
Oh,
it kind of hurt my heart.
My heart.
Because the camp I've been taking the students here is what you just described. And it's just like, it's almost like a family-owned business where they're like really sweet people. But those people, not necessarily paycheck to paycheck, but they live year to year. A year is affected. And
season to season, yeah.
Season to season. That's probably the better way to put it.
Well, and I think the other part of this to think, discipleship-wise, like I have very profound discipleship moment memories that happened at camp. And if camps don't exist for 2 or 3 years, there are students in student ministry right now who will not have those experiences. So what does that mean for their discipleship? I mean, it just exposes the reality that as lead pastors and as, some of us student pastors listening to this, this is an opportunity for your discipleship to go from kind of the big camp moment to a really one-on-one personal discipleship thing, which maybe should have been all along. It's just a revealing, kind of an exposing of the way we've depended on sometimes camps to do that aspect of discipleship that's just not available now.
Yeah.
No more microwave discipleship.
And we'll go on to the next topic and say, but one thing Danny actually, like, I didn't know this even existed until I came to this church, but it's the simple church model, right? Where like the focus is on the preaching, the worship in small groups. Is that an accurate, like, summary of it, basically?
That's a book, right?
Yeah, there's a book.
You stole my idea. I'm not bitter, but
but in that simple church model, it's like the extra stuff. Not that it's bad. Like, there's some good stuff that comes with extra stuff, but it forces you to hone in on the main issues. And I think what you just said, Jeff, is the thing that really challenged me. Like in the last 2 years of me doing student ministry, was with all the conversations of like, when you have a student that's LGBT and they want to go to camp, what cabin do you put them in? Or when you have all these different kind of complications to what is typical student ministry or whatever, if student ministry is if camp is the focal point of your student ministry, then like what happens when you take that out? Is your student ministry like gone? Like you have to be innovative to create those moments or create those discipleship pathways that doesn't have to attach itself to a big event. So then I think of like churches that use like really big conferences or really big events, or even churches that like have giant arenas for their sanctuaries, and like that is the main way they do it. I appreciate stuff like Andy Stanley saying, we're going to divest that money from those big events and focus it on community outreaches. Like there's something there that is going to kind of reshape the way we look at church, or maybe it won't. Maybe after there's a vaccine for COVID, we'll all just have amnesia, and in 2021 in December we're all going to Passion again. Like I don't know, but like
Right.
But like the reality is like I think there is this shift that's happening that that some people won't come out the other side of this, and it sucks because like you guys all said, there's some nostalgia tied to some of these places.